Hi, this is Carol Baskin, and today's guest is Margaret Gates, the founder of Feline Nutrition. She's a wonderful woman who has dedicated her life to better nutrition for the tabby on your couch. So sit back and enjoy this interview with Margaret Gates.
Well, I am the founder and director of Feline Nutrition, which is a organization that advocates for the feeding of raw meat diets for cats. I should say, bioappropriate diets. We've been around since 2008, and what we primarily do is try to educate people. We don't sell a product, and what we do is we have a fairly extensive website with a lot of information on how to feed raw meat diets, what the benefits are, and it is especially geared towards beginners because we remember what it was like in the beginning when it's kind of a nervous making thing to be changing what you're feeding your cats, and the idea of feeding raw meat for a lot of people is kind of scary.
And it's a beautiful website. I just went there again this morning and it looks like it's changed a little bit. I just love your header at the top, everything from tigers to tabbies.
Well, that's one of the things that we always like to try to get into people's minds is that they should think of all cats as cats. And when you ask people to think of what a tiger or a lion is eating for lunch, they usually think, or automatically think, raw meat. We've all watched documentaries. We've all seen, what tigers and lions eat, and that's something that is a really easy image for people. And yet, when you ask most people what are they feeding their house cat for lunch, the first thing that comes to mind is something out of a bag, kibble. And we're trying to change that. They should be thinking raw meat also for their own cats because all cats are the same. It's just the size of their prey that varies.
How did you come into this field of work? What was it that inspired you to say, you know what, other people need to know this too?
Um, Mostly it was we had had a whole bunch of cats, and a lot of them had gotten old and had gotten a lot of the diseases that are very common nowadays. One of them had diabetes, which led to complications, and she eventually died. We had cats with kidney problems, some dental problems, and when that group of cats had passed, and we got new cats kind of all at once, we were looking to feed them the best way possible because we knew nutrition was very important. And I had discovered that most of the diseases that are out there these days are diet related. And so I attended a series of lectures given locally by a local veterinarian, and one of them was all about nutrition. And in this lecture, she got out all her supplies and made a batch of raw food right there. And that was kind of my light bulb moment when I realized that this was something that was very easy to do. This was what cats should be eating to have optimum health. And I started feeding all of my cats on a raw meat diet right away. And at the time, my cats were about a year old. So they were young, healthy, did not have any medical problems. And even just with the change in diet, I was amazed at the change in them. They had more energy. They stopped waking us up in the middle of the night. They're, which they used to do. They'd get hungry. And I realized because the food they were getting wasn't very nutritious. And their coats got amazingly soft and silky. I mean, it was really a big change. I think if I could take my cat on show and tell and just show people what it's like to have a cat that was the raw fed, people would be amazed at what a difference there is in the coats. And one of the best benefits that I tell people about all the time, and many people tell me they would have switched their cats to a raw meat diet simply for this reason, is the poop doesn't smell at all.
And I think that's so hard for people to believe because we've all had those stinky litter boxes. I mean, how many commercials have been devoted to stinky litter boxes?
Absolutely. And we used to keep a can of air freshener next to the litter box because the stench was overwhelming. And that's when my cats were just eating canned food. And the change that happens right away. I mean, that's a change that happens within like a day or two at the most. So it's very dramatic. There, not only does the poop not smell, which is important when you have a lot of cats, like I do, it becomes a very big issue. Not only does it not smell, they poop about half as much, and it's dry and crumbly.
Wow.
That's completely normal. These big, gloppy, soft puddles that cats sometimes do is not normal at all, and it's a sign your cat is having trouble digesting its food, and it's a sign you really need to feed it something else. So and I'm sure the cats feel better when they're having more normal, bowel movements. That's got to be something that's got to be uncomfortable for them. So there's a lot of benefits, and I saw all of those benefits. And what I started to do was to talk to people. Like most people who discover a really good thing, I started talking to people about it, and I discovered almost everyone fed their cats dry food. The very few that I talked to that fed raw meat diets, were actually feeding them or had even heard of them, usually had discovered raw meat diets after a desperate search for something to help their sick cat. And that was something I realized, both of those scenarios, feeding dry food or only looking when your cat was sick, I realized were both things that I really needed to change, and I could. So I looked around on the internet, and there was some good sources of information, but most of them were fairly scattered. So I gathered a team, a bunch of people. We have veterinarians. I have our communications director, Ashley Root, who's done brilliantly on the website. I'm a graphic designer, so I had the graphic design skills to be able to put together the website, the graphics for the website, and I had people that would do the website. So we started that. We wanted the website to be not just one voice, which a lot of the other websites that had good information were just one person or one viewpoint. So we gathered veterinarians, authors, people that were involved in rescue, and got a lot of different opinions and viewpoints from a lot of different sources, because we thought it was very important that people that were coming into feeding raw diets that were new see that it isn't just one person doing it. It's a lot of people doing it, and it's not a fad. It's the way cats really should be fed.
Oh, that was a really smart approach. Do you remember what year it was that you had heard this veterinarian that did the presentation in front of you with the raw meat diet?
That was early 2008, and I started the organization that summer.
Oh, wow. So you got right to it.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with the change in my cats, and I realized that there was the food that people are feeding, especially dry food, which is, we view dry food is not an appropriate food for any cat under any circumstances, no matter what the ingredients. It's too low in moisture, which is a big issue with cats. Cats evolved to get most of their moisture from their food. A mouse is 65 to 80% water, and they don't have a very high thirst drive. So if you feed them a diet of dry food that is like 10% moisture, yes, they're going to drink water, but they're never going to make up the water that they should be getting. And they're always going to be slightly subclinically dehydrated, which, if you know cats, they're very good at concentrating their urine. So they don't need any more stress on their kidneys than by having them be not getting enough fluid. And they having the dehydration issues also affects their urinary tract. So it can lead to a lot of problems. It's also in all dry food, because of the way it's made, has to be carbohydrate based. Now, the pet food companies have gotten away from grain because they realize that pet owners are realizing grain is not a good thing to feed cats, but they're just substituting other carbohydrates, because you can't make dry food without adding in some sort of starch. And cats actually have no requirement for carbohydrates whatsoever.
Wow.
They don't need any. And that's what's so good about a raw meat diet, is it's high in the moisture, because you're emulating a prey-based diet, and it doesn't have carbohydrates in it. The the carbohydrate content for a raw meat diet would be 0 to probably point something, very low, and it's just not necessary to feed cats carbohydrates. They can digest them, but they can only digest them in a very limited way.
I think a lot of the premium cat foods try to stress that they are a perfect blend of everything that your animal needs. So if you're feeding a raw food diet, how can people make sure that they're putting all the right ingredients in there? Do you have recipes on your site, or how would they know?
Yeah, we have a recipe that is, it's a recipe where you start with chicken thighs and you add in liver and chicken heart and supplements. Because you need to add the supplements because you're starting out with a limited cut of meat, because we have to be practical and give people a way to make it from what's available. So if you're feeding a diet, you can make it at home. You can grind it and make it at home and add supplements. There's B vitamins, fish oil, taurine, and some other supplements. You can also buy. There's a lot of different kinds of pre-made food that are complete diets where they've added the supplements for you. There's a lot of those available now, frozen, so it's very easy to feed. People think feeding a raw meat diet is hard, and it's not. It's extremely easy because there's so many options. Making it yourself, that's usually the least expensive way, but you need a grinder that can handle bones, because you do grind bone into the mix. Cats need, when they're eating a raw meat diet, it can't be just meat. It has to be meat, organs, and bone, and then some supplements. Some people also feed what they call raw meaty bones, or Frankenprey diets, where you're
Frankenprey?
Yeah, they call it Frankenprey, which is Franken as in, creating a equivalent of a prey item out of different parts. And that's a little bit more complicated in that you have to feed a certain mix over like a week and have it even out. But you feed organ meats, you feed whole meat cuts with bone. People think their cats can't handle bones, but they're actually, if you watch a cat eat a mouse, it doesn't just eat the meat and leave the bones. It eats the entire animal. That's how they get their calcium, is they're eating very small bones. You can give your cat chicken wings and other small boned pieces. Some people will feed chicks and mice. You can buy those frozen and give them. So you can actually give actual prey, small prey, to cats, and they usually love it.
It's great fun too.
That's a problem. Some of them, they just play with them first. But one of the things, if you're going to feed a ground diet, we always recommend that you do introduce chunk meat into the diet, and if you can, small meaty bones, because that's what helps keep a cat's teeth clean and their jaws exercised. Cats actually, when people think about cats chewing, cats actually don't chew the way we do. Their jaws only move up and down. They don't move side to side. So there's no grinding action going. Cats will, they use their teeth, their side teeth, just to slice the meat into pieces small enough to swallow. And it's that chewing action, where they're chewing through skin and muscle and in small bones, that creates the scraping action and keeps their teeth and gums healthy. So if you're feeding a ground diet, which is good because that's a way to get bone into the diet if your cat won't eat bones, and it's also a way to get all the supplements into the diet. But we do recommend that you feed something that requires your cat to actually exercise their jaws, to get that side chewing. And I have a cat that will eat. You give her chicken wings, and she'll just eat the whole thing, bone and all. And you can hear her crunching away. And I'm always very pleased when she does that, because she has beautiful teeth. This cat, is 6 years old, has never had to have a dental.
Wow.
Because she keeps her teeth clean. Sometimes the people will tell you that dry food keeps their teeth clean. It doesn't. That's actually a myth. If you've ever had a cat that ate dry food and then barfed it back up again, it comes back. Same way it went in. There was no chewing going on. They're just swallowing it. And so it actually can be detrimental to their teeth, because it introduces starch into their mouth. and that can create a situation where tartar can build up. So.
Oh, wow. When you're talking about a grinder, are you talking about a grinder or a grinder? How big of a grinder?
It needs to be a slightly more powerful grinder than just a home grinder. There's a number. You can see some recommendations on our website for what kind of a grinder. It needs to be able to handle at least small bones, up to like a chicken thigh bone. Most of them will. You need to get into a slightly more commercial type grinder if you wanted to handle anything bigger, like turkey bones or other kinds of bones. But even this kind of small, powerful grinders can usually handle like a chicken thigh bone. They might have a trouble with a leg bone. Those get a little bit big. But it's very easy. You just grind up the meat and the bone with the supplements, and it makes a mix, and you add in some egg yolk and the supplements and mix it up, and it makes a complete diet that you can freeze into portions. I put them sometimes into ice cube trays to make my own nuggets, which makes it very easy because they're usually about 1 ounce portions, so you can easily portion out what you need to thaw for the cat for the day. So
it's pretty quickly.
Pardon me?
It would defrost pretty quickly too if it was in small little cubes.
Yeah, you put it into like a baggie, and you can just lay it in a bowl of warm water, and that will thaw it out if you're. Also warm it up to what we call mouse body temperature, which is what a cat would prefer. They don't usually like it cold, although I'll have some cats that kind of will eat it cold, so they like little chicken sickles. But it's really easy to do, and it's something that you can just go and purchase a different product. You don't have to make it yourself. Some people like to do that because then they can control all the ingredients. And that's something else that we really emphasize to people, is that when you're feeding a raw diet, you're not feeding something that's very complicated. It's something that is just made from the meat, the organs, bone, and some supplements. There's no mystery ingredients. When you look at a dry or canned food, you don't actually know what's going into it. And there's all ingredients in there that are some kind of mysterious. And especially if you get into the things that are meals, meat meals or chicken meals, it's a little questionable what those are made out of. And people feel a lot more comfortable, I certainly do, when I'm bringing home the meat that I'm going to be feeding them. And so I know exactly what's in the food, and I know the quality. And I think my cats have really benefited from having having that control over what they're eating.
Now, will that little calico let you pick her up and show everybody how beautiful she is?
Yes, she's around here somewhere.
I thought I saw her right there in the corner of your screen.
Oh, this is actually the another one. This is Fifi. Come here, Fifi. Oh, she's not cooperating.
It always has to be on their terms.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. But it's very easy to do, and we really encourage people to give it a try for the health of their cats. That's what we're pretty much all about. Is we've made a fairly extensive website that deals with a lot of the issues about feeding raw diets and the connection between raw diets and a lot of the diseases that are out there with cats. There have been a lot of people that are looking very seriously at raw meat diets as a way to help control symptoms from IBD. A lot of cats, once they're put on a raw meat diet, their IBD symptoms will go away.
And that's irritable bowel disease?
Yeah, irritable bowel disease, which is something that is very prevalent in cats. We have a story on our website about Alistair, which it was a cat that was in a rescue facility in England. And he was being very well taken care of, but he'd had diarrhea for a year. And they tried everything to get this cat healthy. And of course, you can't adopt out a cat that's having constant diarrhea. It's just, so he wasn't going to get adopted. And fortunately, it was a no-kill shelter, but they were really looking to figure out what was wrong with this cat. The vets had given up on him. They tried all sorts of things. They tried steroids. Nothing worked. And the woman there, through a series of connections, ended up looking at the article we had on our website by Lynn Thompson in New Zealand about IBD. And she put him on, there's a transitioning diet of broth and cooked meat that you just do to kind of calm down the gut. She did that, and then they started feeding a raw diet, and that cat's completely normal.
Wow.
That's what he needed, was to be on a proper diet.
Oh.
And now he's been adopted. His new family is feeding him a raw meat diet, and he's fine. And I hear that story over and over again, where diet-related problems are either fixed completely or mostly by switching to the diet that cats were supposed to be eating in the first place. There's also a lot of success with diabetic cats. For cats that are newly diagnosed with diabetes, switching to a raw meat diet and doing what they call tight regulation on the insulin, which is very careful monitoring and only giving as much needed to get the cat into the normal range, there's an 80 to 90% complete remission rate using
that
those.
Is amazing.
And usually the diet alone has a dramatic effect on the insulin levels, because they're not being fed the carbohydrates anymore. And that's part of the problem, is, and probably one of the contributing factors as to why the cat got diabetes in the first place, was the diet it was being fed. It's not all diet, it's somewhat genetic, but the diet has a big influence on it. And if you get a cat right away and switch them to a better diet, you can get them off insulin, because no cat should be getting diabetes.
And yet it's very, very common, and it's like I'm hearing about it all the time, and so I'm wondering, is it that we are able to diagnose it better now, or has it always been a problem, or is it because of what we're feeding?
It is partly because we're better at diagnosing it. It is also because of what we're feeding. I mean, if you think about it, back when when cats were getting fed meat scraps and what they could catch, there wasn't this incidence of diabetes. Diabetes has it is much, much more common, and there's statistics showing that it's been doubling in and how much it occurs. It's something that really can be prevented by feeding the right kind of diet and just pretty much eliminating the carbohydrates out of your cat's diet. They don't need carbohydrates. Those pictures on the pet food labels where they show chicken and then they show grains and vegetables and fruits. It's like no cat should be eating those. They're completely. It's not really in cat's nature to want to eat those. So it's very beneficial to the cats to be feeding them a proper diet.
Do you see any change with issues like hairballs and those kinds of things, or is that just not at all related?
It's somewhat related in that cats should normally be passing the hair through their systems, and they shouldn't be coughing it up, although they will do that. It's somewhat related in that cats on a raw diet tend to shed less, so that can lead to less hair getting ingested.
Is a raw meat diet something that you would wean kittens directly from their mothers to a raw meat diet, or would you go through the broth kind of thing that you mentioned for the sick cat?
No, that was specifically for a cat that was ill. Kittens can go right to raw meat. In fact, if you think about it, that's what they would do if the mother was tending to them on her own. She'd go catch something and bring it back and let them start experimenting with eating it. So kittens, through hundreds of thousands of years, the food that they went right to was raw meat. So there's no reason not to give them raw meat diet right away. I've certainly heard lots of people that feed raw meat diets to kittens, and it tends to make them do better. I mean, I hear from people in the rescue community that they'll sometimes, if kittens aren't doing very well, they'll switch them to a raw meat diet, and suddenly the kittens are thriving. They're robust, their coats get good, their digestion is good, and it just goes to show that that's really what all cats should be eating is a raw meat diet. And there's also people sometimes ask, well, should you feed an older cat a raw diet, and shouldn't you be feeding them something different? It's like, no, there is no such thing as life stage foods for cats. Cats eat the same thing throughout their entire lives, and it's only kittens will eat more, per pound. They can require twice as much food, per pound of body weight as a adult cat because they're growing. And the same for cats that are pregnant or nursing. They need a lot more food. That's the only difference is they would just eat more or less of a food. They don't need something different just because they're a kitten. They generally just need more food.
The reason I'm asking you is, do you have a phone sitting near your desk that I'm picking up some feedback, and sometimes it's from the phone. That's why I was moving everything away from my desk here.
I moved it away. Hopefully that won't.
We do a lot of fostering for the Humane Society of Kittens, and so we raise them up to 2 pounds and then we send them back. And we've had some dietary issues with the cats where we've had to try all different sorts of things, and I'm ashamed to say, I have not tried the raw meat diets. I'm wondering if we did that, how hard it would be for a new owner if they did not keep up the raw meat diet. Would the cat just absolutely refuse to eat? Have you experienced that?
They probably wouldn't refuse to eat, generally because most cats that are on a raw meat diet, one of the problems people have sometimes with getting cats to eat a raw meat diet is, as you know, raw meat doesn't have much of a smell. If it does, you probably shouldn't be eating it. But fresh raw meat has a very subtle odor. And cats that are used to commercial food, which they have intentionally made fairly stinky to entice the cats to eat it, sometimes cats have a hard time viewing it as real food because they're conditioned to eat something that is very smelly. So going the other way, most cats that eat a raw meat diet will pretty much readily eat other foods because they, suddenly encounter this food that is highly aromatic, and that's very deliberate to get cats to eat it, especially with things like dry foods, which I really hope someone isn't going from feeding a raw meat diet back to feeding dry food, which is considered a very poor diet. But if they're going to a dry diet, there's whole industries that make nothing but sprays to put onto dry food to get cats to eat it.
Wow.
Because otherwise cats would have no interest in this product because there's not enough meat in there to tempt them into eating it, and it's filled with carbohydrates, which they have no natural inclination to eat. So,
and even if they did eat it, it would be, I would think, more like going to a diet of potato chips. It might taste good to them, but it's really not giving them the nutrition that they need.
Yeah, and that's why they'll tend to eat a lot, because their body's telling them they need more nutrition.
Talk about obesity. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah, that's something that is also related to a poor diet. Almost every cat that eats a raw meat diet will self-regulate as far as weight. They can get fat on it. It's unusual, but most cats will get to their proper weight and stay there when they're on a raw meat diet. They're getting a lot of nutrition for the amount of food that they eat. It's not something that is filled with food that they have a hard time digesting. So it's very satisfying for them. It's also because, especially if you're feeding things that have chunks of meat that they have to work a little to eat, or if you're feeding the raw meaty bones, the experience for them is more psychologically satisfying. That's something we also feel is very important is, cats are evolved to be chewing and gnawing on food. And for them, that's really important psychologically. Imagine if, in some ways it's the same for humans. Imagine if you were presented
I was just thinking that.
Imagine if you were presented with a diet of porridge your whole life. You would you'd get pretty bored, and it wouldn't be good psychologically for you. There needs to be things in there that satisfy what they evolved to eat. And I mean, I see my cats when they are chewing away on a chicken wing, a raw chicken wing, and they're crunching through the bone, and you can tell they're so happy. This is a treat for them. They just, you could tell it's really satisfying to them. And so that's, I think, if somebody is feeding a kitten the raw diet, I would encourage people to continue to feed that diet so that the cat stays as healthy as possible. Starting kittens when they're small is also, eating a raw meat diet makes it a lot easier, because kittens they take to eating raw food right away. There's no problem transitioning. They'll eat chunks of meat even when they're tiny, and you need to get them started on chunks of meat. Let them get some jaw strength, and then work up to feeding the raw meaty bones. You can give them chicken necks. They love that. They have the bone in it, the small bone, so they can readily eat those, and that's how they can get their calcium. And cats have no problem digesting bone. People think, if they eat bone, it's going to pass right through them. No, it gets digested. That's what they evolved to do. Cats have very acidic digestive systems. They have no trouble handling that. It's completely normal for them to do so. But if you have kittens will take to it right away, but if you have an older cat that's only been eating dry food or only been eating canned food, it's sometimes hard to get them to recognize the raw meat as food, because it doesn't have much of a smell. And it's also because it's unfamiliar, and cats get used to things and they don't really want to change. So we really recommend, if you have kittens, start them off on a raw diet right away, and then you won't have problems trying to transition them later to a healthier diet. I guess my analogy would be if you'd only ever fed your 3-year-old Cheetos its entire life, it probably would have had a great time, but then it's not going to want to go back to eating broccoli. Yeah. So get your cats eating what they should be eating right from the beginning, and they're going to be happy. They're going to be healthy.
This might be a good test subject, because we're just one of many fosters, and if our kittens go in much healthier and softer coats and without all of the bowel issues that cats can have, I think that would give them an advantage to be adopted first. But if it were advertised by the Humane Society that this cat has been fed a raw diet and this is why you're getting this really primo cat, that maybe people would continue that for the cat's life, and that would really be a wonderful thing to see happen here.
Yeah, we would love that. It's one of the things that we really stress, is that we want people to be feeding this from the moment they get their cat, whether they're getting it from an adoption agency or however. Is we really want to stress is what you start feeding is what people will usually continue feeding. And one of the things that we want to do is to try to provide materials to rescues and shelters to help educate new pet parents that this is what you should be feeding, because a lot of people don't even realize the raw meat diets are an option. They think dry food's perfectly fine, otherwise they wouldn't be selling it, but it's not perfectly fine. And if you want to stay out of the vet's office and have the healthiest cat possible and the longest lived cat, then you really should be paying attention to diet. And we have one of the things that we're doing right now is we're running an Indiegogo campaign to raise funds to be able to do a lot more outreach and reach people when they first get their cat. We want to be able to provide really top quality materials to rescues and shelters so that they can educate people on their own. And we need to provide them with materials that will then lead people to the website to find out more. And we want them to have this material when they first get their cat. I remember the last time I adopted a cat, it was from a rescue group, but they were holding the adoption event in one of the big box pet stores. And you get the usual packet of adoption papers, because there's always a contract that goes in there. And we got the packet of adoption papers with a few coupons, and then we're handed our free bag of kibble. And that really, at the time I hadn't started feeding raw diets, but when I look at it in retrospect, I mean, that was that was for them, it was a marketing ideas. You give them, this food, the cat will love it, of course, because it's been sprayed with things to ensure that the cat's going to love it no matter what the ingredients are. If the cat starts eating it, people will continue to buy it. So we want to be able to counteract that kind of marketing and be able to tell people, you really need to think about this. This is really important for your cat's health and its future health. And you should really be thinking critically about what you're feeding your cat, and don't make assumptions that everyone out there is going to be giving you good advice as far as what the best thing to feed is. Most people kind of, they assume because people have been feeding these kinds of foods for 50 years that everything's okay. But if you look at the incidences of disease in cats that are diet related, things aren't okay. And we'd really like to change that. So we've started an Indiegogo campaign, and we would really like it if people would support our work. We have a lot more stuff that we'd like to do. So you can check out our website. Our website is feline-nutrition.org. Check out our website. The link is there for the Indiegogo campaign if you'd like to contribute. We'd love it. You can also join Feline Nutrition. Joining is free as a member. We send out newsletters. We would like to get our membership up, because that also shows people that are new to it that this is not just a few people here and there. Right now we have about 3,300 members from over 60 countries.
And so if you post a new article, these people that join, would they get a copy of that, or do you just send those to me, because I know I get them?
The new articles we don't send to everywhere. We send a newsletter out, and the newsletter would recap the most recent articles. So if somebody happened to miss it, they can catch up on the newsletter. But we don't send one out for every article, because that would be once a week, and we don't want to drown people. So when we send out a newsletter, though, we do send out it does have links to the newest articles that are there. But we have a lot of information. The thing I hear from people a lot is people talk about having to do research. He said, I was researching raw meat diets. And that's one of the reasons we put together the website. Is I kept hearing that from people, and it shouldn't be that hard. It should be easy to find this information. And we've tried to compile information on all sorts of different topics in one place so that people can find out a lot without having to go everywhere and do their own searches. I have heard from people where they send me an email that they were thinking about changing their cat's diet. They found our site, and they said, well, I know what I'm going to be doing this whole weekend is they're going to read every single article, because they're trying to educate themselves. And I do hear from people, they say, okay, no, I'm starting tomorrow. And then I hear from them a week later, and they say, it's amazing. They see all the same things that I did, is the improvement in the coat, the improvement in the energy levels, and almost everybody that starts feeding raw meat diet, they end up saying they can't believe they ever fed their cats anything else.
Wow.
So,
mentioning your Indiegogo campaign, we're going to have a link to your website and to the Indiegogo campaign, but I see you have a video on here, and it's only 4 minutes, so if it's okay with you, I'd like to go ahead and play that.
Great.
It should record straight
from
what it sees here. Can you hear it playing?
No.
Oh, okay, I'll let you know when it's over.
Okay.
All cats are carnivores. The word carnivore means meat eater. Just like the big cats, your cat's a predator. But we've lost sight of that. We feed them foods loaded with carbs, which they can barely digest. This is not the way to happy and healthy. Hi, my name's Margaret Gates, and I founded Feline Nutrition because cats are more than just pets. They're part of the family. Feline Nutrition's mission is to help cats everywhere be happy and healthy. How? Let's talk cat food. What you feed your cat is more important than you might realize. Choosing the best diet for your cat can be confusing. There are so many choices. Feline Nutrition is all about educating people on what cats should be eating to stay healthy. Look to what a cat would eat naturally, what they evolved to eat. and the question of what food is best becomes pretty easy to answer. Feline Nutrition advocates for cats because they can't do it for themselves. We're an international team of veterinarians and pet food specialists dedicated to helping cats be healthier by getting them fed food that truly meets their needs as carnivores. Our focus is on nutrition, with expert information and research backed by science. Since 2008, we've helped thousands of people make good decisions about cat food. But there are still millions of cats being fed unhealthy food. That's why we need your help. For more than 5 years, we've worked hard and done as much as we can with no budget. Now we're ready to do much more. We're a not-for-profit advocacy organization, and we get no money from the big pet food companies. We are asking you, people who love cats, to support our work. We need to reach all of those people that still feed unhealthy food just because they don't know there's a better way. For so many cats, it is a matter of life and death. Cats should thrive on their diet, not just survive. What people start out feeding is almost always what they feed for the rest of their cat's life. We're helping rescues and shelters get adopted cats fed the right kind of food right from the start. With your support, we can reach even more. The media loves cats. Now we're getting the media to pay attention to cat food too. Your contribution will give us a budget to promote our message and be the voice to counteract the marketing of unhealthy foods. We have a ton of videos waiting to be produced. It's a great way to reach people. After all, who can resist a cat video? With your support, we can get these done to help more cats get fed the right kind of food. We're doing awesome print work. Great stuff to get people's attention and make them think. Help us get it printed and shipped where it's needed. Our website is getting bigger and more powerful every day. We've gone from 20 visits a month 5 years ago to over 20,000 unique visits a month today. Your contribution will help us be there for all those people looking for answers. We can't do this without you. If the happiness and health of your furry family matters to you as much as it does to us, then help us be the voice for feeding cats the right way. Our mission is that important. People need to know that the single most important decision that they make for their cat is what goes in that bowl.
I love how you ended it by saying the most important decision is by what goes in that bowl.
Yeah, we thought that was like one of the most important messages in there is we want people to really think this is a decision, you need to make and you need to think about it. And it shouldn't just be something you do offhand.
And who is this beauty in your lap?
Oh, that's Bunny. She got to appear in the video too. Hey, Bunny.
Oh, how gorgeous.
She's sleepy, but one of the things I wanted to comment is we talked about how on the website we brought in lots of different views from all different places, and one of them, of course, is you've contributed a couple articles. One of which is there's an article called "There's No Kibble Served at the Big Cat Rescue," which I thought it was very instructive for people to read about your journey in discovering what was the best way to feed the big cats. And I thought it was very interesting that back in the beginning, when I think you had experimented at one point with a zoo kibble of some sort, and the big cats were experiencing the same sort of problems that the little cats did: poor coat, bad digestion, problems. And of course, you realized very quickly that this was not a proper diet, and went to something else. So I do tell people this is not just a problem with little cats. Is you feed the big cats wrong, and they're going to have problems too. And in that article, we also have the video where you show what it takes to feed I believe it's just the lions and tigers, where it's the buckets of food. And I found it very interesting that you were feeding a ground supplemented product. Of course, I think the tigers were getting 5 pounds at a time. Whereas, my 5-pound tube of that stuff would last quite a while, but and then they were getting the raw meat chunks. They were getting, the beef and the whole chicken quarters. And I think it really shows people, once again, what we were saying is, cats are cats. Scaled down, that's exactly the same sort of diet you should be feeding your little cat. So.
And I know you've gotten a little bit of pushback from the hybrid breeders, but the hybrid cats, I think, as a group, suffer more from the irritable bowel disease than any of the other domestic cat species do, or breeds do. And it's because they weren't meant to be hybrids in the first place, but they just cannot deal with a dry cat or wet, canned type cat food.
And yeah, that makes sense.
And so many of them that either we have had to rescue or that others have rescued, it's been the same thing. They were fed, commercially prepared cat food diets, and the people often would give these animals up because of projectile diarrhea. And as soon as you put them back on raw food, they're just fine. That's what they're meant to eat.
Exactly. And that's, we always say that, you should be feeding your cats a diet that's going to make them thrive, not just survive. And, a diet of dry food is, for cats, it's just a survival diet. It's not going to make them thrive in the same way that, yes, humans could probably survive on corn chips and that's all. But you're not going to be healthy. And it's the same thing with a whole dry food diet. It's not a healthy diet, and it's also, the main problem with it is it's dry, and you're never going to be able to make up that lack of moisture, and that lack of moisture is going to lead to problems, and not only urinary problems, but it's going to stress their kidneys.
And that's such a huge problem, especially for the older cats.
Yeah, you don't really want to, cause any more stress on a cat's kidneys, because they're already, their kidneys work overtime because they have very concentrated urine. So their kidneys are already working at top speed, and putting more stress on them is just going to lead to problems down the road. And, cats shouldn't be getting these kinds of diseases that are going to shorten their lives. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, people thought cats lived 12, 14 years, something like that, because cats really weren't living that long. They were being fed very poor diets. And there's also, they didn't have as good medical care. But now cats have pretty good medical care, and if we can improve their diets, cats should be living into their mid-20s. That should be, a normal lifespan for cats.
Wow. What about skin issues?
That's something that a raw diet can really be helpful with. Skin issues can be frequently diet related. They can be allergy related, and having a raw meat diet provides a lot of the nutrients that help keep the skin skin's barrier functions going. It usually will reduce things like rashes or skin irritation. That's one of the things that people see all the time. And that's also true not only with cats, but with dogs. People, the same thing is there's, raw feeding of dogs is also a very big thing. And people will have problems with, skin problems with either cats or dogs, put them on a raw diet, and the skin problems will go away. Cats can have allergies to certain kinds of foods, and sometimes those allergies are to the cooked form of the food. So you can have a cat that will have an allergy to chicken, but will be fine with raw chicken. And so those are things to all investigate if your cat is having skin problems. But generally, cats that are on a raw diet, their coats are beautiful. They don't have dandruff. They shed less.
Oh, no, that's interesting, because that's what people are usually allergic to, is the dander.
Well, the dander's in the fur anywhere. If you're talking about allergies of people being allergic to the cats,
yeah.
I'm not really sure how a raw food diet affects that. I have heard anecdotally that raw-fed cats produce less allergens because their skin is in better shape to begin with. But I haven't seen any studies on that. I've just heard anecdotally that's true. But the raw food diet for the cats themselves produces less allergies, in the cats being allergic. So,
And you did mention that this obviously would be just as good for dogs, but your site is focused on feline nutrition. Do you have any ideas of going into, of having like a sister site for dogs, or is there a reason why you're focused on cats?
well, we focused on cats because that was, my experience was with cats, and it's also, we viewed it as more important for cats. Cats are in a class called obligate carnivores, which are animals that have become specifically physiologically adapted to a diet of all meat. And dogs aren't obligate carnivores. They are carnivores, but they are able to eat other things. So it's not quite as critical as it is for dogs as it is for cats. And interestingly, people hear that word obligate carnivore, and of course it's kind of self-explanatory in that they're obliged to eat meat. That's how they adapted. But cats aren't the only animals that are obligate carnivores. They're raptors are obligate carnivores. So are ferrets and minks. So are dolphins. So are crocodiles. And if you think about it, all of those animals, I mean, if somebody had told you that you could feed corn to an eagle, people would be, no, you can't. They eat meat. And it's the same for a cat. A cat is the exact same way. They are meat eaters, and they have gone through a lot of physiological changes when they adapted to a meat diet. They can't make some of the vitamins that dogs and people can make from precursor vitamins. Like they can't make vitamin A from beta carotene because they have to get it directly from an animal source. And that's why feeding them meat is so important. They as far as how their bodies work, is they need their food to be from an animal source, and the fresher the better for them. And they're all geared up to eat it raw. That's how their bodies work. And sometimes people will ask about the whole idea, especially people that are beginners in feeding a raw meat diet. They worry about, well, what about things like salmonella? And that is something that first of all, it shouldn't be in the food to begin with, but cats have very short digestive tracts. They will process their food in about 12 hours, as opposed to a human, which is about 36. And their digestive tracts are highly acidic. As anyone knows who's ever had a cat barf on their hardwood floor, it will strip the stain right off.
That's why it hurts so bad when you bite.
Yes, it's very acidic. So those are two of the things that help cats deal with pathogens. And a healthy adult cat is easily able to take care of naturally occurring pathogens in food. If you think about it, an animal, like any cat, will eat meat and they'll come back 3 days later. I mean, we've all seen documentaries where leopard, hauls its kill up into the tree, and 3 days later, it's still eating the same meat that's been sitting out in the sun. And so cats have evolved to be able to deal with pathogens in the food. Because they digest their food so quickly, and they only do this if they're eating a raw meat diet. If they're eating something that's filled with carbohydrates, it slows down their digestion. And this is dangerous, actually, in an animal that might be ingesting pathogens, because pathogens take a while to multiply in your system. That's why it's so much more dangerous for a human. They ingest a little bit of salmonella, and we have the perfect internal breeding ground to get a huge dose and make us sick. Whereas a cat can eat, a small dose of salmonella, nothing happens because it goes right through. It's out of the cat before the bacteria has any time to develop, into something that's going to cause the cat problems. And I think it's interesting that there's a while back there was a case where dry food had been contaminated with salmonella, and in that thing, 89 people got sick, and yet and this was a dog food, and not a single one of the dogs that ate the food got sick.
Oh wow!
And that's one of the things, is those kinds of contamination things are actually really dangerous for the people around. They're not as dangerous for an animal. And if you look at it, most of the recalls, in fact, virtually all of the recalls for contamination in food are almost usually dry food and occasionally wet food. There's been very few raw food problems. It's just really not an issue. And if you're making your own meat, you're really buying meat that's, for human consumption. And meat in this country is actually very safe. People have it drilled into their heads that raw meat's dangerous, but it's actually fairly safe. The only thing we don't recommend is that you don't buy pre-ground meat from like the supermarket, because they're counting on you cooking it. If you're going to grind meat, grind it at home, or buy something that's specifically meant as raw pet food, because they're very careful about the hygiene on that.
Really? Now, I would not have thought there was a distinction between ground beef or beef chunks as far as the safety of it.
There is, in that once you grind a meat, you're creating a lot more surface area for bacteria to grow on. And if you think about it, anytime there's contamination problems in meat, it's almost always in ground meat, because with things like salmonella, if there's a little bit on there and you create a huge new surface area for it to grow on, and then let it sit around in the supermarket for a long time, that's when problems can happen. Like a chunk of meat, because one thing that people don't really understand is meat by itself is usually sterile. It's only when it gets contaminated from the outside, and that's through poor slaughterhouse practices, will contaminate meat. From the outside, it's usually from fecal matter. That's usually where it gets introduced. And so a chunk of meat, if it was contaminated, would only be on the outside, and you can cook it a little to get rid of that. And it's only when you grind it and mix all of that in and create a lot of surface area that you can then, have a big breeding ground for bacteria. And that's why if you're going to grind it, you should grind it and immediately freeze it. And that's what pet food companies that make raw diets do, is the meat is ground and it's immediately frozen. It's not ground and left sitting around, even refrigerated. There's very strict procedures that they go through to minimize any kind of risk. But actually, raw foods are very safe. There's very, very few instances of anything going wrong with it. I've talked to so many people. I've never talked to anyone that had any problem with pathogens on a raw food.
With the prepared diets, you had mentioned that before, and I think for a lot of people that may be a much easier way to go.
Yeah.
Where can they find those, and are there differences in the quality of them? Like, are there different makers where you would suggest some and not others? Are those on your website? How would people know that they're getting a good diet?
There are a lot of different suppliers. I'd say almost all the ones out there are good. Certainly don't know every brand, but the commercial foods, there's some major brands out there, and then there's a lot of local regional brands. And I would go to one of the smaller pet stores around. Most of them, you could call them up, find out if they carry raw diets, and try different ones. See what your animal likes. There's some that are for cats and dogs. They will usually have a very tiny amount of vegetable matter, but if you see vegetables on the label with a raw food product, it's going to be very, very small percentage, 1-2%, that kind of thing. So it's fine for a cat. There are a lot of places, people that sell complete diets where you don't have to add anything. Other people will sell grinds that you then add your own supplements to. There's an outfit called Hair Today in Pennsylvania that sells ground meats of all different kinds, and prey foods and chunk meats, and those come unsupplemented. So if I got one of those, I'd get a rabbit grind that had meat bone organs in it. Then I'd add my own supplements to it to make it complete, because it's you want to make sure that your cat's getting all the vitamins and minerals it needs. And the best way to do that is to add supplements, which is really easy. You can add them individually, or you can buy a product that they call a premix, which has them all mixed in, and you just mix it in. So it's very easy.
Oh, nice. So this premix, is that also available at these pet stores, or can they order it online?
You can order it online. Al-Nutrin is a good one. It's made in the USA. Feline's Pride also offers a kit that you can add to your own ground raw meat. They also make a ground a diet that's already pre-made that you order online that comes frozen. And they were one of the early people making raw diets. And they're one of the few that makes a diet that is completely grain, vegetable, fruit-free. There's nothing added in there. So it's a complete diet that is just the meat, bone, organs, and supplements, which is what we recommend is just those. You don't need anything else in it.
Well, I am sure you will be shocked to know we've been talking for an hour now.
Oh, okay.
But there's one more thing that I haven't heard you mention, and that's fish.
Fish are, it's one of the things you probably should avoid with your cats is tuna, even though they love it. Tuna is a top of the line fish, which means it has a higher percentage or chance of being contaminated with PCBs or heavy metals, so it's one to avoid. Fish is not something that cats should be fed on a regular basis. We think they should stay more with the foods that they would more likely be encountering in the wild, birds, mammals, rabbits, things like that is good. But you can feed some fish. Like I feed about once a week, I feed my cats some canned water-packed sardines because it has really good omega vitamins in it, omega fatty acids. And so that's I feed. But generally you don't want your cat on a all-fish diet. Occasionally you can add it. People will add salmon sometimes to the raw diets, which is fine. It's another good fish to feed. But I would avoid feeding a lot of fish.
I'm a vegetarian, but I do sometimes eat fish, and boy, the cat knows when I'm eating salmon. It's like, oh, salmon.
Yeah, it's smelly, and it's interesting that you say that you're a vegetarian. The one thing that I was surprised at the beginning, but I'm no longer surprised by, is how many vegetarians end up feeding raw meat diets to their cats, because they usually became vegetarians because they were looking at the healthiest diet for themselves, and then they turn around and look at their cat and think, okay, well, what's the healthiest diet to my cat? And then they think, oh no, I have to go back to the meat department. I've heard from so many vegetarians that ended up, concluding that they had to do the right thing by their cat and feed them a raw meat diet. And they said, I thought I was done with the meat, the whole meat thing, but I'm back. But they said it's worth it because they also see the tremendous health benefits for their cat.
Well, Margaret, thank you so much for taking out an hour today to talk with our listeners about feline nutrition. And again, your website is feline-nutrition.org. And if you go there right now, you'll find the link to the Indiegogo fundraiser. And at this point, it's $1,230. They're trying to raise $24,000, probably by the time this podcast comes out, because we're recording it a few weeks in advance, but hopefully they'll be getting much closer to that goal, and you can help push them over the goal, because people really do need to know about raw food diets. And I would think getting that message out to veterinarians would be hugely helpful for you.
Yeah, we want to try to reach as many people as we can, and we do have great perks, so take a look at those. And even get a perk to hair today if you want to try them out.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? Anything we missed?
I did want to say that I've been a big admirer of Big Cat Rescue for quite a while. And
thank you.
If you actually go to our website and look in our resource center, we have a section called Raw Savvy Rescue, which are rescues that advocate raw diets for cats. And Big Cats Rescue is in there because you do feed a raw meat diet, and you're a strong advocate of those kinds of diets, although we do point out you can't adopt these kittens.
Except for our Humane Society kittens, and they are going to be trying out some of this raw meat.
Yes, the big cat you can adopt, but we also wanted to have you in there because we do really emphasize to people, think of what a big cat eats, and then look at your cat, and you have to realize they're not that different.
Mm-mm. They are exactly the same.
Just
yes, 500 pounds difference.
Yes, eat quite a bit less.
All right, thank you so much, Margaret.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been the Cat Chat Show. You can join us at thecatchatshow.com or find us on iTunes. If you give us a 5-star rating, that would be great, or on Stitcher Radio. Until next week, bye-bye.